You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gurd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-commerce strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.
Thanks for tuning in to the Inside Commerce podcast, sponsored by Centra and Greben. More about them later. So let's do our little scene setting. Today, myself and Paul are going to be talking about a topic that is being hammered around the industry, unified commerce. And what we want to do is pull it apart and like the myth, the mystery of unified commerce. Is this something new? Is this just the emperor's new clothes? And to cut a long story short, yes, to the latter. We think it is. So the way that unified commerce is being positioned, and there's one definition that I'm going to pull out, which is unified commerce is the practice of connecting your back-end systems to your customer-facing channels via a single platform. It's a setup companies require in order to support omnichannel journeys and create a unified view of shopper interactions, products, and management system. This, for me, and that's from Big Commerce, I think is actually one of the better descriptions of what this is meant to be. And that is that it's not about trying to replace everything into a standardized vendor, because e-commerce doesn't exist in a silo. It exists in businesses that have retail, that have B2B trade, you name it. And actually, you cannot, for most businesses of that size and complexity, just find one platform that does absolutely everything. But trying to consolidate front-end experience into the same ecosystem and technologies makes perfect sense. And then also trying to unify data, to create a unified view of data, to provide people with the views of data they need across the business, and standardizing technology around that, where previously different parts of business would invest in different data tools, is a really sensible thing. However, where we're coming at it from is that actually this isn't new. And a lot of people are saying that unified is different to omnichannel. I'm going to politely disagree, because omnichannel was always the evolution from multi-channel. Multi-channel, which is just we can sell in different channels. Omnichannel was putting the customer thinking at the center of that and looking at aligning the channels so that you had greater synergy between customer service, customer experience, data, technology. And one example would be like returns. In a multi-channel world, if you bought online and tried to take it to a store to return, it wouldn't work because the systems weren't joined up. The store had no idea about what that order was and couldn't process it. In the omnichannel world, and retailers like House of Fraser have been doing this since 2015, actually you buy online, you take it into store, that order can be scanned, they can recognize it, they can process it, they can take it back, they can offer you an exchange, credit, whatever it might be. That is an omnichannel service. And that's what I think a lot of people are trying to package unified as being different, but it's not. So there's my opening gambit, Paul. What's yours in terms of what unified is being positioned as and what you see it being?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've definitely got a lot more knowledge on what's actually behind these terms than I do. So I think I mean, my exposure to unified commerce has been at events, and it's typically been different vendors talking about how they consider them, or like the role they consider themselves to play in unified commerce. And I hadn't really, to be honest, considered that like the definition is around one platform, because, and as we were talking about before we started this, like I think if someone said to me, what are the best examples of unified commerce or omnichannel or whatever else, I would be talking about, Rafa and, other brands that just have very connected experiences across a native app, loyalty, retail, web, physical events, whatever else. And I think I would have said, it's a great example of unified commerce, but actually, I think the actual definition is probably slightly different to what I thought it was. But I think my view on it is that I think it's got so broad now that I just think it's the same as e-commerce. It's just good commerce strategy. I always felt like omnichannel was kind of needed when it first came about, or maybe not omnichannel, maybe more multi-channel, but I think they were needed at the time because that was when people were starting to look more at connecting retail and web in particular. And I felt like, it just kind of helped the industry to invest in that. And there was a lot of content around it. So it kind of needed terminology. Whereas I feel like unified commerce, it just feels really broad. And to me, it doesn't feel like it's as needed.
Grebben create digital flagship stores for iconic brands of today and tomorrow. We are the #1 Centra agency in the world, with more than 50 Centra implementations to date. We are also e-commerce design specialists, platform and tech partner agnostic. Try our new e-commerce design subscription. Visit Grebben.com.
Yeah, and I think herein lies the issue, because the definition that I'm taking is from things that I've read, but there are different definitions. People are using it to mean different things, and herein lies one of the inherent problems within our industry. And I love being part of this industry because there's a lot of amazing people, but there is a lot of jargon, and often this comes from a genuine place of trying to provoke discussion and create connections, and therefore drive leads from a marketing and sales point of view. But I think often it kind of like obscures things for the recipients of it, like the people working in brands and retailers who are trying to make strategic decisions about what is it that they need to be thinking and focusing on, and what is a distraction. And I just, for me, this is a repackaging of what omnichannel was always meant to mean. And it's articulating one of those key strategic goals of an omnichannel strategy, which is consolidation. And that's not just tech, it's process, it's customer experience, it's data, it's standardization of technology. And that has always been there. And I think that's what we want to do in this is dispel the myth about, is unified something new? Is this a new trend? No. Is it valid? Fundamentally, yes, because it's telling us that we need to simplify how we operate and how we interact with customers and the technologies and processes that enable that. But I think maybe let's move on to what we're seeing and how we're seeing people evolve strategically in this area. And I guess I'll start with one bit. And I know that we work with different types of businesses, so we get to see different things, which is why we always share a lot of information. But one of the areas I've seen the biggest consolidation in, and this is working with either from big department stores down to small £1 million e-com retailers, single channel, is the commonality is no matter which business, there are disparate systems and there are disparate data flows. People don't have a joined up view of data, whether that's analytics data, BI data, or whether it's financial data coming in for a team to do month-end accounts or conciliation processes. And trying to connect disparate systems is complex, time consuming, and often fool's gold. And for most small business, they can't afford to do it. They don't have the resource. So people are using more modern integration layers now to be able to take data flows from multiple places, do transformation in that middleware, whether that is a patchworks, it's a custom one that an agency's built, it's a high key, and you pick your middleware. Going up to the higher end, then you go into markets like US, and you've got different players coming in as well. But it's doing that piece there so that actually all the end points that need data in the right formats have got it. And that for me is the unification piece. You're unifying without having to consolidate into a single system, or do lots of the extension work in each system.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think when we were talking before, I think we both said I think data is at the heart of unification. And I think the only other thing I would add to that is on the front end. I think it's, being orientated around identifying a customer and being able to collect data around that customer. I think one of the big trends that I've seen across our clients has been account first strategies. So trying to get a higher proportion of users logged in, trying to get people building accounts, collecting more first party data as part of that process, and incentivizing that, and then being able to use that as part of what I would consider an omnichannel strategy, or what I would say, but I guess it's the same thing. And then, as you say, it's investing in the resources and the tooling to then pass the data that's needed around different systems to be able to understand as much as possible, create the best experience, and just generally kind of connect those touch points. I would completely agree.
And to be honest, whatever you call it, I always say to clients, it doesn't matter what you call it omnichannel, multi-channel, unified. I mean, it's wording, it's semantics. The key point is the strategic aim and the process to get there, and what the end goals and outcomes and success criteria are going to be. And if I take a couple of small businesses I've worked with over the last few years who've gone to a Shopify, a big commerce, so they've gone SaaS from legacy, often it's open source, like a WooCommerce or a Magento. they don't have the funds or the resources to then buy into like a fully integrated ecosystem where they've got the best in class tool. And what they actually need to do is use the systems they've currently got at the moment, but give them better data and more accurate and reliable data so that they can do better financial reporting and reconciliation, for example. And that's tick, great. We're on the journey. And then in the future, when they reach the right size in income and therefore investment capability, then you probably look at enhancing richer systems on top of that, whether that's like data warehousing, proper BI, etc. So I think a lot of this is about an evolution rather than a revolution piece.
Centra is the only commerce platform built exclusively for fashion brands. Over 300 fashion brands run on Centra, including icons like Paul Smith, Jeff, Avenue, and Nudie Jeans. Centra solves business logic challenges for fashion brands like no other platform, and they are on a mission to help you scale up rapidly, globally, across all online and offline channels. Take your fashion brand global, faster, further, stronger today.
Yeah, again, completely agree. Yeah, I think the only other thing I would say though, I do think, because I think a lot of people see that the connectivity is the key to this, and like there's usually a lot of like goals within a business of achieving certain things, and the big investment or like the material piece of work is the integration. I have seen businesses just be sold like MuleSoft as a solution, and they go and invest hundreds of thousands of pounds into something that ties together these systems, and it's not just MuleSoft, Delboomi or whatever else, like all these like enterprise like iPasses or integration platforms, and that's not it's a bigger project in most cases, and just bringing in the software and people is probably a bigger thing than the software. And it's the only thing I would.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And also needing to understand any limitations that these enterprise systems have in terms of like their throughputs, their like concurrency, like how much can go through that platform at once and what impact that has to you when you're in peak. I've seen people who've had setups where actually it's really restraining the speed at which data's thrown through those is not the speed they'd need to execute on their business strategy. And you've got really flexible modern technology now. You've got the likes of Airtable, and I know that like Ollie Rhodes is running No Apps is working with some of the brands that you work with from a consultancy point of view, like Current Body, for example, where actually instead of having to go right, let's buy in another big vendor. Well, we'll use a more agile, modern tooling. We'll use an API-based tool where we can just take 2 or 3 key functions and connect it and make it work and do our transformation. And there we go. And that's fixed the gaps that we have. So I think this is the thing is it doesn't have to be all or nothing to be unified.
Yeah, completely agree. I don't know why I was just thinking about Current Body and them being kind of almost single channel. And that kind of just made me think about one thing that I personally feel is maybe, because I feel like this whole unified piece has come from Gartner or one of the other like analysts, organizations, whatever you call it. And then a lot of the platforms have responded to it. And I feel like the difference with unified is there's more of a consideration around B2B and wholesale, maybe. At least I look at it more so. You would see if you were looking at a diagram or like some kind of marketing material, B2B and wholesale would be a part of it. Whereas I feel omnichannel is not as broad. I don't know if you agree with that or whether that's just my perception.
I find the semantics around it is what confuses people, because at the end of the day, the goal is you want consolidation, you want effective processes, and you want to be able to execute channel strategies how you want and not be constrained by technology, process, people, etc. And it doesn't bother me what term people use. The reason for doing this podcast is a bit provocative, but also to bit of clarification on what we think and what we see in other people doing. So I don't think it really matters. I've worked with B2B companies, and the 2 that I worked with most recently in the last couple of years on replatforming, none of them are talking about unified commerce. Maybe they're the type of business, I'm not working with a massive global like B2B or more complex B2B like manufacturing, for example. Maybe the discourse around it varies outside of the ecosystem in which I operate. But the people I'm talking about I'm talking to and working with, coming back to your original point, they want better data. because they've got loads of data everywhere and it's not joined up, and therefore they can't make effective decisions. They can't like analyze customer behavior. They can't segment accurately because they've got their data in different places, and they want simplified and consistent tooling across channels. So if they've got a trade store and a B2C store, they want to be able to run it from a CMS point of view, for example, the same, even though the execution's different. They want to have if they have in a promotion engine, they would want a single engine that can handle B2B and B2C promotions rather than having two different vendors doing it. So I'm seeing it. I'm not seeing people that I work with in B2B seeing unified as something different or really using that terminology.
No, I think it's just something that I'd recognize from a marketing perspective, that I think Omni is actually very multi-channel orientated, like more like direct consumer versus I wonder whether that's a part of the real definition of unified.
Yeah, and I guess the fact that we're not 100% sure of it tells you that this can be really confusing and misleading, which this is on my habit terminology. We've had this discussion about headless so many times before, and headless for me is it created so much noise, and like headless is an architectural solution to a business need. It's not a business goal, and I think this was unified is the strategic aim to simplify technology so you have fewer vendors to deal with, fewer licenses, greater cost efficiencies because you can use them at scale across more channels. A good example being like if you're using Shopify for online and retail and using the POS because the POS is fit for purpose for what your business needs. I think those are the goals that people need rather than going, right, we want to be unified, because I don't think it means anything.
Yeah, completely agree.
I think I'm just a grumpy old ecom bastard who just hates terminology now. I think let's talk about other areas where we're seeing people making this move strategically to what unified should mean and what I've always thought omnichannel means. And payments is one area I think is really interesting. So, and I know you will have worked with a lot of businesses like this as well, where they will have, so they might have a different payment provider set up in like connected to their ERP that's doing offline sales for trade, or is being used in stores, even like B2B businesses who do loads of road shows and events where they're using it connected to remote terminals. And then ecom's got its own gateway, and they might have ecom on Shopify with Shopify payments, or they might have a Magento connected to Agit. You pick your payment provider, but that makes things much more challenging for finance, for handling reconciliation, because you've got to reconcile against different systems, different reports, and then you've got different contracts, different payment rates, which is always fun. And I'm seeing more people looking not necessarily out of re-platform cycles, but when they're reviewing technology, of can they consolidate payment providers into a single contract that can go across all those channels. Are you seeing a similar thing?
I think a lot. I haven't seen it as a massive trend, but I definitely know that's what people want. But equally, I think in some ways it's getting more difficult. And I actually mean that is purely in Shopify world. I think it's getting more difficult. Because I think we've got a lot of clients that we use, Adyen in store, Adyen for like pay by link for like trade payments, like you say, kind of isolated, just or like payments. And maybe some other solutions around business. And then they're kind of forced, or not forced, but definitely in a position where they but are pushed towards Shopify.
Don't be diplomatic.
I'm trying to be diplomatic. And I think, obviously the goal is that Shopify POS becomes a solution where, they've got these high street brands with 200, 300, 400 stores using it long term, and then they can use Shopify payments directly there. And then I think they'll probably have a solution, or like potentially look to broaden draft orders or something that kind of manage some of the other areas. But I think actually a lot of our clients aren't on Shopify, are happily using Adyen, for example, globally across all channels. And like you say, there's benefits to a finance team and other kind of internal processes and refunds and whatever else. Whereas I think it's a bit more difficult in Shopify.
It is. And then coming back to the principle of this podcast is what a business is trying to achieve. They're trying to simplify their landscape and find cost efficiencies, but without compromising like business tooling, operational capability, and the customer experience. Because if you switch to a payment gateway that doesn't offer you a specific payment wallet in a country where it's 60% of revenue, then it's a massive problem, because you might have ticked the consolidation box for the tech and the simplification, but you've screwed up your channel and your sales potential. So yeah, 100%. Payments is one of the most, I think, is one of the most complex areas. But the bit that I see a lot of frustration in finance teams with e-commerce is the reporting that they get out of the payment providers to do the reconciliation. And I guess one thing where Shopify's made it easy for people, and other platform payment providers that do blended rates, is when you know it's a blended rate, it's very easy to check you're being charged the right thing. When you've got different rates across all different card schemes and lots of different additional ancillary charges on top, trying to reconcile and make sure that not just transaction to transaction from system to system, but actually, are we being charged the right rate here? Have they got us on the right tier? And I've seen this with Adyen's great for global sales, but it does make the analysis more complex.
Yeah, absolutely. I think payments can be a really big friction point in a replatforming project. And you rightfully mentioned the other thing is, in Shopify land, if you're quite an international business, chances are you'll be using like a Molly or an Airwallex or something else to enable some of those other international payment methods. And it's just friction. Like, that's the thing. And I guess finance teams in particular just want to buy one vendor. They want rates based on global volume. And it does complicate things, and it makes change harder to manage.
It isn't, and these are the conversations that often don't happen because or don't happen in the right depth. Because if you change tech, you can, from an IT perspective, and this is not criticizing anyone working in IT, because from an IT perspective, you can tick the organizational technology goals of a consolidation by buying a platform that fit for purpose, works, fits into the systems architecture, great, it integrates how you need it to. But actually, if you haven't gone in the nth detail on each of these subject matter experts who will then have a dependency, you can find issues. Like I did recently with Shopify, and Shopify is fantastic for many things, but it's not great on default reports and exports for like order reporting. You need a proper BI. You need a solution in place, whether that's using like Google or you're using a Power BI or whatever it might be that you're doing it, or you create something custom. And you realize you've got all these gaps. So this great aim of like the one system to bind them all is a myth, because every system has limitations. And this is where I think all of these like middlewares and these I'll call them what you want, iPaaS integration layers, Airtables start to come in handy, because anything where you can take a compromise, fix it so that the subject matter expert isn't adding friction to their daily life, then that to me is what I would then call unified. And it doesn't have to be one system to do that.
Yeah, I agree.
I think I went on a bit of a ramble there. My brain was trying to work out where I was going with that one as well. Yeah. And the question I had for you, which I think is really interesting, because you work with a lot of brands who are global as well. So they've got lots of different countries, sites, and often brands that are trying to like bring themselves onto one e-com platform for global, and then they will have like legacy stacks in different regions that will be different. So they might have different back office systems, different payment providers, and you get local market variations and local market challenges like compliance. I'm going through a German launch at the moment. You've got all these additional data requirements of what you have to show on the front end, which requires customizations, and not all platforms are as easy to. What are you seeing in terms of the challenges around this omnichannel unified approach in an international context? And is it achievable, or do people need to accept that it's always going to be compromised?
So I think we've seen a lot in this area, and I'm sure you have as well. So I think we have a bit of since we started Vivant 7 years ago, we've worked with quite a lot of global brands, and it's been a mix of how like teams are structured, tech stacks are structured. But I can certainly think of a few where we're working solely with EMEA, and they have a end-to-end completely different tech stack, completely different team structure, completely different way of operating. And I think when you see that, and then a brand trying to globalize, I think it's usually just a massive change project. And at that point, it's like a transformation. And typically you'll see a lot of people lose jobs, and you'll see, a lot of like new investment lines and everything else. But yeah, sometimes that comes as a result of acquisition. Sometimes it's, just like huge transformation projects. But to be honest, I feel like that's what drives that more so than, we haven't had loads of clients where, and even now we've got quite a few where we're only doing EMEA, but we haven't had many where like high on their agenda is like building a global data structure, for example. But I think that comes as a result of like maybe how the teams and P&Ls are structured more so than that not being the right thing to do. And then where I have seen it, like I said, it's been more of like a business change and quite often it'll be an efficiency thing as well. Like there's someone we were working with where they just completely cut Europe recently and, started managing it globally. And, as part of that, they've, moved another market to their platform, integrated with an existing ERP. And basically, it was a budget saving project, but I think that varies a lot, I would say.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's you're right, the team structure and the operational processes that exist within those teams, aligning those globally is so hard. If you take like a North America, like Europe, UK, Asia, it is so complex. You can't. I guess I don't work at transformation level.
Sure. As I have.
No, well, I guess less so these days, but I don't work at a transformation level globally in that way, and there are transformation experts out there. Then we should do a podcast on this, actually. That's just the need for it. But I guess I question whether it's achievable to create a uniform approach. I think simplify, often where I see, so I did some work with Mars, where I was training their like global e-com teams around digital store optimization. And I could see that as well. So they each had their concept of perfect digital store, and they each had systems in market, like Profitero, for example. I think Europeans were using, I think it was different on using the US. They were doing the same thing, but in a different way with different formats. So what it meant is their reporting wasn't standardized. And one of the key aims is actually, well, if we standardize the KPIs and the dashboards, we don't have to change tooling, because not all vendors operate in all countries and are set up to do so. They might have a platform you can log into, but do they have local country support? So when your team really needs that help, they can get it. No, they're waiting for somebody to come back online tomorrow. And that doesn't really cut it when you're working in a fast-paced like FMCG, CPG environment. So sometimes it's just about tweaking what you've got rather than trying to put it all into the same supplier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think on that transformation episode, we should get John Godwin on. So we've worked with him a little bit at Travis Perkins, and he obviously went to Space 48. But he's got a really good background. I think we could get him. And obviously we're saying this live on a recording. So
yeah. And then we're telling people we're going to do an episode that if it doesn't happen, you can just call us charlatans, basically. That's absolutely fine. Because we are. Okay, so who do you think, have you got a good example of somebody who has embraced the principles of unified e-commerce, even if they aren't calling it that?
Yeah, so I think I've already used Rafa, so I won't use them. I think Nike and Adidas have both got really hot on this, and particularly like historically, Nike had a number of apps that weren't really connected with their like web interface or their physical retail stores, and then I don't know when their transformation project started, but they moved way close, or they moved towards like a global account, a global experience. And I feel like every touch point you have with them now has been kind of globalized, and there's references of other channels, and like, you could go to like an activation they would do in Berlin and you would still, have a similar experience to online, and you might, it might be driven by account. And yeah, certainly their kind of account and loyalty strategy, I think has been at the heart of that. But I think they're a great example.
Yeah, I think that is a nice one. I guess it helps when you have the pockets to invest in proper transformation and to invest in the systems architecture and the data flows behind it.
Yeah, I think the thing with them as well, they famously years ago went super focused on direct and less focused on wholesale, which I think they reversed a bit recently. But I would imagine that was a big part of their direct strategy as well.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And the people I've worked with who are trying to adopt these principles, I see the conversation around data as the central part to it. Not the focus is talking about data more than systems, which is good, because you've got to have a data strategy to then know where you've got technology gaps. And the data strategy is basically aligned from a all of the angles: customer experience, trade, and you name it.
Yeah.
So, sorry,
I was just going to say, I think actually, almost, because I was just thinking of some other examples in my head of brands where I've had a good experience that I would put into this bracket, like Space NK, lots of other kind of like premium brands. And actually, if you think about it, that a lot of them is centered around a very well structured loyalty program. And like, obviously the two aren't the same, but I do feel like, often loyalty is the mechanism to get people to log in or identify themselves in store, etc. So I do feel like the two tie in together quite well.
Yes, agreed. So let's nice pithy summary that we like to do at the end of this episode. So my one is going to be, and please, if you think I'm talking bollocks, call me out on it, disagree, let me know why though. It's always useful. So for me, unified commerce isn't anything new at all. It's a rebadging of the whole strategic premise of omnichannel. But I think maybe it's done deliberately to try and get deeper discussion now about what this means at an enterprise level, what it means operationally, what it means technology, data-wise. But fundamentally, it's about putting customers at the center of decision-making and creating a systems architecture that enables and simplifies your ability to execute consistently across channels. And I don't think that's changed in the last 5 years as a strategic goal of businesses. What is changing is the data connectivity and systems connectivity, and also I guess let's call it the barriers to entry. There's greater democratization in terms of smaller businesses with smaller budgets being able to afford to use tools that help them create more consistently around channels or get better data. And we've talked about ecosystems like Shopify. Then you've got like BigCommerce with its app ecosystem as well. You've got platforms with stronger APIs to get data out of systems. You've got the likes of Airtables coming. So it just I guess the barrier to entry for starting to achieve some of this has come down, and I think that's probably the biggest change I'm seeing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think just your initial point around it being created deliberately, I definitely think that more by the likes of Gartner, who are just trying to create demand. It's a new way of justifying investment and signing off vendors and signing off transformation projects and everything else. And I think that's what Omni was years ago. Yeah, I completely agree on that point. And I feel like I've been a little bit more negative on Shopify this time. I know you say that I always fanboy Shopify. But I do think they're driving it at the lowest level. Like, I don't think, they position themselves as unified at every level, which I don't think they are yet. But I do think a lot of brands, small brands that I know that have done it, have grown up in Shopify world, and, they've taken advantage of the ease to introduce a native app or a different sales channel and everything else. So I do think they're kind of creating that little operating system that typically for the smaller brands and maybe brands that have always lived in Shopify world.
Yeah, I think the SaaS platforms have done a really good job of that, because this is what I mean about the democratization. Because if you're on a more legacy platform, if you take the go back a few years on an open source Magento, then you need more engineering resource to get plugins working or to do integrations, because you don't have all the pre-connections. Shopify is clearly the leader with the breadth and depth of apps that you've got to just one-click connections. The integration work's done. Yes, there's often configuration work, and there's settings to manage, and there's theme impacts. So it's rarely just turn it one click and you're done, although there are some. And that's the bit that I think shifting is if you're a small business and you can't afford to spend 5 to 10 grand on a developer to do an integration for you, but you can afford $30 a month on an app and spend a bit of time yourself in the theme code, well, hey presto, we've got that ability to create that more seamless experience for the e-com team.
Yeah, completely agree. I think POS is a big part of that. And I actually think the only other platform that's maybe got a proposition alongside that is Centra with like a Voyado and a CT, where actually combined they've got a really strong kind of unified view of the world.
Yeah, agreed. I think Centra was the other one I was going to mention. So that they don't feel we're not giving them the love on this episode, but I think they've targeted specific ecosystem around the fashion lifestyle focus they've got, and it works well. You know, they've got the search, the merchandising, and they've also got the omnichannel capabilities with like Ingrid, and so they've got the ability for, I guess, from the SME level up to the more enterprise, larger businesses as well. I think even Shopware went down this route on their version 6 when they started to build out more apps to enable this connectivity, just on a smaller level, I'd imagine, than Shopify and BigCommerce. But right, so that's our ramble on unified commerce. I quite enjoyed this episode. It's nice to just sit and chat about stuff. Tell us what you think. I hope it was useful. What do you think? You're working in e-commerce, a retailer, you're working as a brand, you're an agency, a developer. What's your perspective? Is this really anything new, or do you agree? Do you think we're talking broadly in the right terms, that actually this is just repackaging what has always been sensible e-com strategy? Let us know. And thanks for listening.
You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast, hosted by experienced consultants James Gurd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-com strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.